Hi, folks. It's Denise Howell here, and we've got This Week in Law coming up for you next. Bill Kirkpatrick is here. He teaches media and cultural studies in Granville, Ohio. And we've got Rick George from Florida. He's the future lawyer. Also with us is the once and future lawyer, Evan Brown. We're going to talk about the Mac App Store, CES, tablets, Sandy Bridge, and we're going to talk about the Giffords shooting too and the social media ramifications of all of that. Thanks so much for joining us next on TWiL.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for This Week in Law is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiL, This Week in Law with Denise Howell, episode 94, recorded January 14, 2011, DRM Inside. This episode is brought to you by Squarespace.com, the fast and easy way to publish a high-quality website or blog. For a free trial and 10% off the lifetime of your new account, go to Squarespace.com and use TWiL, TWiL, as your offer code. And by MailRoute. Businesses of every size use MailRoute. One user, 50,000 users. It doesn't matter. MailRoute will protect you from spam and viruses, simplify your life, and make your email usable again. Hi, this is Denise Howell, and you're listening to This Week in Law. I'm here today with a really interesting panel of folks, including Bill Kirkpatrick, who teaches media and cultural studies in the communication department at Denison University in Granville, Ohio. Hi, Bill. Great to have you.
Hi, Denise. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Also with us is the future lawyer, Rick George from St. Petersburg, Florida. Hi, Rick.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing great. And joining us again is Evan Brown from Hinshaw and Culbertson and InternetCases.com. Hi, Evan.
Hey, Denise. How's it going? It's great to see you again.
Great to see you, too. You are clean shaven for the new year, we see.
I am, yeah. I reconfigured some of the settings, always have the holiday beard, but now, sailing on into 2011, ready to go. So here we are.
You defragged your face.
Right. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how it can affect your outlook. It really, really does. It's like cleaning the cat.
You can't go wrong. You look great with a beard. You look great without a beard. So.
Oh, thanks. Shucks.
It's just nice to have the variety when the holidays roll around. We always appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. So we've had lots and lots of stuff going on. Of course, CES happened last week. We weren't able to be there, but there were some legal developments or things worthy of comment from the legal angle that we'll get to in a bit. I wanted to start out with the Mac App Store, also something recent that has rolled out. The legal angle there, of course, is when there is such a centralized means of distribution of software. That means that there are no more serial numbers on packages, really no more packages on shelves. There are no registration systems that have to be maintained by developers. They don't have to keep download servers. And their anti-piracy strategies are now completely in the hands of Apple in the case of the Mac App Store. Apple does it all, but you have to agree to Apple's terms of service. And one legal ramification of that is that folks who have looked and pondered and thought about this hard have decided that Apple's terms of service for its app stores violate the GPL. So there's not going to be any GPL software available, either for the iPhone or the Mac in their new Mac App Store. And I'm wondering, too, about how all this might protect consumers ultimately. I haven't combed through the developer terms of service for Apple's App Store. But I'm wondering if, a lot of the concerns that we're hearing about apps being this sort of renegade world where they're tracking you and using your information in ways that is not disclosed, that some of that might be able to be controlled by whatever Apple is requiring of folks who deal with their App Store. So I throw that out as our context. And I'll give it to Bill first and see if you have any thoughts on all this.
Well, I think that the issue of the GPL is interesting because people run afoul of the GPL without intending to at various points in various ways. That there are programs that are built on GPL components, and it's very easy to lose track of exactly what licenses are involved. So it's not a single software license, but it's often a bundle of licenses that are going into a software situation, and so people can run afoul of the GPL without meaning to. In terms of the terms of service and the closed environment, one of the things I think is interesting there is that the iPhone seemed to justify having a closed app store. And one of the things that people expressed concern about, Jonathan Zittrain and others, is that we're entering into this world in which we are an app world rather than an open soft, a sort of closed system rather than a generative system where anybody can do anything that they want to with the device. And where the iPhone seemed to justify that because you really want to be able to make phone calls and everything else is sort of secondary, the iPad seems to justify that closed system a little bit less, and on the Mac, it seems to not be justified much at all. So the ways in which they might be using our data, I think, is an interesting point. But I can't quite imagine Mac or Apple actually wanting to close this down. So they've promised that it's always going to be parallel to another system, parallel to the usual way of getting software onto your computer. We'll see if they hold to that.
Right. Well, it may be parallel, but it may be irrelevant. I put something in our show notes here, which folks can check out at delicious.com/thisweekinlaw/94 is the episode of our show here. That is a story about Evernote's experience at the very inception of the App Store. This is by John Brownlee over at Cult of Mac. And Evernote has generated this nice little graph that shows that when the Mac App Store opened, their downloads just went off the chart. I mean, completely crazy. More users there than they've ever had from any platform. And let's see, the CEO, Phil Libin, said, "We initially thought that since so much of our user base was coming from mobile, that was the key distribution platform. But maybe it isn't mobile that's important. Maybe it's the well-designed App Store." So getting back to your point, Bill, about there being a parallel option, if developers are, really seeing the benefit of being in the App Store, how effective is that parallel option anymore?
Well, it becomes interesting. The case of Evernote is interesting because they're giving away their software, right? So it's a free app, and then they have ads and that sort of thing, and then you can upgrade to a premium situation. So in that sense, Evernote might not be the best test case for the success of the App Store, although I have been in general surprised at the positive the developers are very positive about the App Store and look forward to having their software found and that sort of thing. In the end run, I can see a couple ways in which, though, it's a win for users, which is that on the iPhone App Store, we're talking about fairly low-priced apps, that there were the apps with reputations that they could charge more for, but a lot of these were 99 cents, $1.99, $2.99, and that sort of thing. And you could be willing to take a flyer on a piece of software if it's only going to run you, $5 or less. With the App Store for the Mac, it seems like that risk is a lot higher. And since there are no demo versions, then, at first blush, it's kind of bad for consumers. I've already been bitten by that. I just blew $15 on software that was kind of crappy, and it's not, it's only $15, but still, it was the absence of a demo version that made it a problem for me. So what that's going to mean is that if consumers get a little bit more cautious, that's going to force developers then to keep prices within a price point that people will be willing to take a risk on, and reputation becomes that much more important. So we could hopefully see that even though it's bad for consumers in the short run, that you can't try the demo versions and that sort of thing, in the long run, perhaps the ecosystem as a whole will put downward pressure on prices and upward pressure on service and support, so that people are willing to make that leap and take the, buy the $29.99 apps and that sort of thing without being able to try them first.
Yeah, I think the social layer that an app store adds is an excellent point to raise, because I think that's why you get people like Evernote having such great success. They have people who love their product, and the reviews for it in the App Store are bound to be, glowing. So if there's someone who has any trepidation at all, even though it's free, about downloading, they're going to see the resounding great reviews and go for it. I know that in the case. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, to that extent, I'd actually like to see the App Store go a little bit further with that social layer, that I would like to make things a little bit more discoverable. The way that Amazon can recommend, okay, you've bought these pieces of software. Here are some other pieces that people have also bought and rated highly. Or I would want to see, what productivity apps does Merlin Mann use and that sort of thing. I'd like to actually see them increase the social layer on the store.
Right. That's the thing that could work for them. Ping, not so much, but software, what you're using and what you recommend, maybe that's their social strategy. Hey, Evan, Beatmaster in the chat room had a good question aimed at you. Is breaking the communication back to Apple a legal problem? I take it he means by somehow jailbreaking. Well, I guess if we're talking about a computer, you're not jailbreaking anything. But maybe blocking the port, or I'm not sure how you do it, but keeping Apple from, I guess, gathering information back about the app once you've downloaded. What do you think?
Well, there's a couple of different ways we could look at that. I suspect that might be a terms of service violation, and then we could start thinking about what the remedies for that would be if that really is a terms of service violation. Then I guess we would also need to consider at the beginning whether or not the technological or the technical functionality of the application would still work if you're going to somehow sever this tie. In my mind, it seems somewhat theoretical that we could do this, or how that we could actually do that then. And then, if you listen carefully to what I'm about to say, you'll hear that I'm not really answering the question directly, but just kind of presenting another issue to think about in all of this. And that is to consider the decrease in relevance of something like the first sale doctrine, which attaches to the sale of tangible media, which we've had, another decision come down from the Ninth Circuit in the last couple of weeks, that Augusto case that we've, another in that kind of triumvirate of first sale cases that we've seen. The other one being the Werner versus Autodesk, that kind of is bringing into our consciousness more this notion of the first sale doctrine, the rights of ownership that attach to media. If the software that we were getting from Apple, or I guess it wouldn't necessarily be from Apple, but from whomever, is distributed and received by the user on some tangible media, then it's unimaginable that any kind of restriction would be there that would stop you from breaking that communication with the mothership, so to speak. That becomes much more difficult of an analysis to make, because with the lack of the tangible media having been sold there's not the protections of the first sale doctrine, which allows you to do pretty much whatever you want with the software you've purchased and you now own. There's much more of a tight relationship there, much more subject to the contractual restrictions on doing something that. So it's in that kind of framework that I would go about talking about this issue that Beatmaster in the chat room is bringing up. Assuming that technologically it could actually feasibly be done without breaking everything.
Right. And getting back to your point that you made a minute ago about the new Ninth Circuit case, did it add any texture or variant on the Werner versus Autodesk case that we've discussed before on the show?
Well, I guess so, in as much as it kind of well, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. What the Ninth Circuit case did, this Augusto case, it held that, despite the language that was on the envelope or the sleeve or whatever, the language accompanying the distribution of these promo CDs, that was indeed a transfer of title, even though the record companies were wanting to call that a mere license, saying, you just have a license to this music on here. You don't actually own that stuff. So I think we would need to think about how that dovetails in with the Werner case. I'm sure plenty of commentators have already been out there, thinking about this stuff. It's just something I haven't put my attention to. But, it does in a certain sense, I think at a rather abstract level, you could say that they might be a little bit difficult to read one or the other, because in the Werner versus Autodesk case, so much depends on the language that is actually used to look at the intention of the conveying party, the selling party. And then with the Augusto case, there is a certain status of ownership regardless of what was said on the outside. So I'm sure there have been plenty of people to look at it, but we would need to it'd be interesting, something to circle back on that issue, because it obviously, I'll stop here in a second. It obviously is important in as much as the importance of the first sale doctrine is declining, to see how we need to responsibly separate these doctrines out as we're moving away from tangible media and more into a model like what we see here with this further evolution in the Mac App Store.
The other thing that is sort of related, and I'm not sure how exactly it's going to shake out, but it seems to me with my limited experience now using the Mac App Store that for Apple products, for example, the notion of doing a family license or, a multi-user license, I'm sure for the enterprise would be a related question. It seems to go out the window. You're downloading for that machine and you're paying for that machine at that time, which, I'm sure developers and Apple like, because they're able to charge everybody more and individually. But apps, for example, that I know when in the past, when I've downloaded them directly from Apple, I've been able to get a reduced price because a reduced price for multiple machines because I'm buying the family license. You can put it on 5 different machines, but that doesn't seem to be available. And, obviously the chat room should correct me if I'm wrong about that, but that seems to be a little twist there that also, it's not so much for sale, but it's, how are you going to have the right to reuse the software once you've downloaded it, if at all. And that one seems to be perhaps going away as well. Rick, have you played with the Mac App Store, and do you have any thoughts on it and on this mode of software distribution?
Well, as far as the licensing laws, you guys are way out of my league. I don't even practice in that area. I'm more interested in the application of the technology to the practice of laws in a general sense. And I'm a Windows and Droid guy, so I don't use Macs, haven't used them. I've been accused, as a matter of fact, of being anti-Apple, which I'm not. I mean, I used an iPod Touch back in the day, but I don't like the control that Apple is attempting to exert with the Mac App Store or with any of their other initiatives. In fact, I think it's counterproductive. What's going to happen is they're making themselves a target for these hackers. I just read a piece this morning about somebody that's figured out a way to get beyond or get around the iPhone's controls by using the speaker jack. I mean, they're jacking into the speaker and they're getting access to the Apple innards that way. So just as security is a myth, it's an illusion in internet communications, just as privacy has become more an issue of intellectual curiosity than of reality. I think that any attempt to lock down the software may, in the short term, increase profits and give Apple more control and other software vendors that attempt to use it. But I think that ultimately, as a legal matter, we'll have some case law when they catch people, but the vast majority of the unwashed hacker world, they're just going to ignore it. They're going to hack their phones. They're going to jailbreak the iPhones. They're going to jailbreak the iPad. They're going to do whatever they need to do what they want to do with the technology, which is why I favor Android. Android is open. It has a lot of problems, privacy problems at the top of the list and security problems, but I believe that the computer users nowadays are savvy enough to take a critical look at the applications that they use, and especially lawyers, and be able to have the freedom of choice in what they use.
Great. Those are great insights, Rick. Thank you for that. Sir Cake in the IRC is telling me that I'm like diametrically on the opposite end of right about the Mac App Store, which is a good thing. He says that you can, once you download once, you can put those applications, and I assume this means any application and not just Apple applications, on all 5 of your authorized machines, which is actually a great improvement over how the individual download process used to work, or of course the actual insert and load the software via CD, DVD method. So I'm gonna have to give that a try. I didn't see any obvious indication of that when I downloaded. It was Keynote I put on my laptop. And nothing jumped out at me that, hey, if you put this on your laptop, you can also put it on your desktop and your son's and, you know, whatever else the other 5 authorized machines are. But I'll give it a try.
Your son is using Keynote?
Not yet, but, you know, they do push presentation software in the schools for them to give reports and things. So that's definitely in the near future. Okay, well, the other just sort of capper on that discussion is the notion, and I think we've mentioned this before, of less freedom, less ability to play around with the software. You know, that if it's all so tightly controlled with the App Store, and I guess this is what you were talking about, Bill, as far as having it be generative and open and not just open to sort of black hat hacking, but also authorized hacking of tweaking things and seeing how it can grow and develop. I don't know, you know, if this is going to be less feasible, because if you're downloading something from the App Store and expecting it to be kept up to date, if you alter it and play around with it, that's not going to happen anymore. But, you know, if you load something off a CD, DVD, that's going to be it for you anyway. You're not going to have that nice update process unless, you know, you've subscribed and go through a registration with the developer anyway, and that would be on a case-by-case basis. So we'll just have to see.
I would miss that. I still use an image editing software that I first installed in 1997 on a machine running Windows 95. I kid you not. It's called Micrographics Picture Publisher. It was later bought up by Corel, and I don't know what happened to it after 2000, but it's just like this wonderful little robust program, and I couldn't imagine my life without it, because if you just want to do something real quick with an image, like crop it or pixelize something or you know, do a little smudging thing here and there. So yeah, I would really miss that freedom. You know, the point being, I'd miss that freedom of being able to keep something at a old version of it. There's something unsavory about the notion of kind of being dragged kicking and screaming into the future.
Right. Paranoid Android in IRC points out something that we haven't mentioned yet, but it's huge, and that is the discoverability issue, that you're going to see things now that are available for you to use that you never would have seen before. And when you do see them, you're going to see them in the context of, you know, other people who've either liked or disliked. It's a much different experience than walking into a brick and mortar store and gazing at a wall filled with software, or gazing at the entire web filled with downloadable, purchasable software options. So yes, I think that people are going to be able to find things to use and purchase that they never would have seen before. So in that sense, it's going to be economically great, I think, for developers and great for users too. So we'll have to see about the other potential downsides of it. Let's talk about CES, since I think none of us went. I know Evan and I were saying, you know, lamenting that we didn't go. Did Rick or Bill, did you decide to go out to Vegas for CES?
Sadly,
right. No. Oh, by the way, if I could interject here, would you ask your title person to correct the website?
Sure.
My
future
website
lawyer,
is
right?
Future Lawyer, not Future Law.
Right. Burke?
Got it. Okay.
Check. Thank you.
And the answer is I go virtually everywhere. And I mean virtually, in fact.
Right. Yes.
There's so much you can do on the web nowadays as far as virtual attendance at these events that it's really not necessary to go out there.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to go sometime, but none of us made it this year. I was attending virtually through all of the great coverage on the TWiT network, which was amazing. All my colleagues, you did an incredible job. Thank you from all of us who didn't go. And we really enjoyed hearing about all kinds of stuff. And it is sort of a gadget-heavy show, but, you know, it's hard to have a gadget or piece of technology that doesn't involve legal ramifications these days. The one that jumped out at me was this new chip that Intel has unleashed called Sandy Bridge, which Warner Brothers has jumped in and embraced and said that they're going to distribute movies using it. And Intel keeps saying that it's not DRM on a chip. It's been characterized that way. We object. We say that's not the case. We're just simply securing the transit mechanism, a la Netflix, you know, that you're going to be able to stream something and be confident that it's not going to get ripped off on its way to its end user. But I can't really get around the fact that that end user has to have the Intel chip in order for the thing to actually work. So that seems like DRM on a chip to me. I don't know, just me.
I hear you.
Evan, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, it's DRM on a chip. It's just, you know, it's tying. And I was thinking about this when you were actually talking about the Mac App Store. You know, it's just tying something to, you know, despite the correction that was it Sir Cake in the chat room gave us here on that, loading it onto other machines. But you know, it seems innovative on the part of it's Intel, right? This is that issue. What Intel's doing on the chip there, tying it in like this, and you know, I can see why the rights holders, the big content industry, is excited about this, because it's a new way of characterizing these. Well, I can't call it anything but restrictions, but it's also tied in with, you know, just wonderfully powerful, you know, abilities of this machine too. You know, hearing about the things that it can do, you know, rendering graphics in 3 dimensions and in real time. It sounds like something, you know, at least it's a great way to package this notion of tying the content together and making it, you know, something that's perhaps a bit more palatable in that way. Kind of, you know, going along those lines, talking about the absolute, you know, the extraordinary power of that the processor has here, this chip has, is you know, there was a notion in this article about how this could be used to take on someone else's identity, and I thought that was a really intriguing notion that may be worth talking about a little bit here. Being able to render something in 3 dimensions so easily and so realistically, it's just really interesting to see how that elevation of the technology and the increase in complexity is so great that it actually is getting into a realm where we're talking about using that to really kind of act in the world as a very realistic avatar in ways that could have real effects, you know, through its use. So there's a couple of different really intriguing things to think about in this whole talk about this stuff that Intel is doing on all of this.
Yes, that sounds like something for our cultural studies professor to pick up on. Any thoughts?
Well, I hadn't thought very much about the sort of stolen identity and the ability of that. As a cultural studies professor, my concern here is the fair use issue and the ability of technology to continue to restrict our ability to make fair use of the products that we have. You know, I teach television studies. I need to be able to get clips of TV shows and that sort of thing. And the deal that Intel has made with the Hollywood studios is that there will be this sooner downloading of, you know, Warner Brothers films if this chip is in place, and if not, you don't get it, right? And so the hope is that consumers will want that badly enough that they'll trade in the freedom to do things with the media that you know, in exchange for the shorter window to get the films and that sort of thing. And it's this kind of multi-front assault on our fair use rights. So we've already, you know, you guys have talked a lot on the show about the DMCA and the ways in which the anti-circumvention provisions of the DMCA were really bad. Now they're not quite as bad. They're still problematic, but they've been relaxed a little bit. But there's this legal assault on fair use rights. Then, of course, the technological assault on fair use rights through anti-circumvention, DRM, and now, of course, this chip. It is DRM. I don't care what Intel says. They can call it whatever they want. It's DRM, right? And then, of course, there's the social front of on which this is being attacked. The whole intellectual property is theft, right? Confusing those terms and trying to pressure people into don't copy that floppy, right? Going back to the 90s that was. So this seems like another move towards that, and the only thing that it has going for it from my perspective is this sort of technological trade-off with the Hollywood studios, and I'm hoping that that's not going to be enough, just as Blu-ray was not quite enough to get consumers on board with some of this stuff. Blu-ray is looking more and more like this kind of interim step that failed on the way to streaming, but now can they control streaming through this technology? I certainly hope not, because that would bring an end to a lot of the things that we're used to being able to do with our media, even if it now requires some anti-circumvention software and things like that. The hope, of course, on the other side is that the DRM hasn't been invented yet, that hasn't been cracked, and whether this becomes breakable, that's up to the hacker. It's sort of like Moore's law, right? Will that continue to hold? Will the inevitability of a DRM break continue to hold? As somebody who's interested in media freedom, I certainly hope so.
Seems like there might almost be an antitrust issue here, that if you have a whole bunch of entertainment-related content that the rights holders only want to distribute if this chip is the avenue of distribution, then that begins to set up, some anti-competitive situations. You can't, if you're a Roku, say, you can't access that kind of material unless you're using that particular Intel chip. And so it seems to me there could be some room for challenge there, depending on how powerful the support behind this becomes. Rick, any thoughts about this issue from CES or anything else from CES?
Well, I'm more interested in the tablet explosion and the impact that's going to have on the practice of law. I'm of two minds on the DRM issue. I have no problem as a lawyer with a public publisher or a company like Intel doing what they can to protect their intellectual property. Where I am of the other mind is that, as our media professor was saying, the consumer wants to use what he buys in a way that is most reasonable and rational to him or her. And the more complex these computers and chips and technology gets in protecting and, in effect, managing the digital rights, the tougher it is for the consumer to use the product or the service or the software or the movie or whatever is streaming in the way that they want to use it. So all of those restrictions, I think, are going to butt heads with the hacker community. And in answer to the question, everything ultimately will be hacked because what is conceived by the engineers and put in a chip can be destructed by a competent hacker sooner or later. So I go both ways on that one. I think that I will let the market play out. As far as CES and tablets, I ended up getting an Inspiron Duo from Dell because it's both a Windows 7 tablet and a netbook. There are a whole lot of things that lawyers do as far as document production that need that kind of software. And I just am not into creating documents on a virtual keyboard. Can't do it. Not efficiently anyway.
I promised you, Rick, we would talk about the tablet explosion from CES from the legal perspective and the legal profession perspective. And I also want to get into this shooting that happened last weekend But before we go to that sort of non-weighty and very weighty topic, I want to thank our sponsor, Squarespace.com. Squarespace is the fast and easy way to publish a high-quality website or blog. It has an easy-to-use UI for creating and managing a website or blog. It's optimized for both beginners and CSS experts. It has hundreds of design templates to choose from. I started messing around with it. I mentioned on the last show I was going to see if maybe our local Boy Scout pack could use it for its pack site. And when I set up my own blog, which also runs on Squarespace, I had a designer help me out just because I wanted to delegate that stuff. But now that she has done the behind-the-scenes work, it's really easy for me to tweak it and keep it up to date and customize it the way that I like to have it. That's at bagandbaggage.com if you want to check it out. You can see some of the features there. I have a photo gallery. You can just pick any of these things that you like. There's like an Amazon recommendation page. There's all kinds of integration with social media. You can put your Flickr stream up there. You can pull in Twitter. All kinds of really neat little modules that you just drop into your page, and they just work. Also, the whole concept of a Squarespace site is modular. The blog module includes import and export support for WordPress, Blogger, Movable Type, and TypePad. There are forum pages you can add. There's a form builder. As I said, widgets for all the social media stuff, Google Maps, and more. The tracking and search engine support is really, really good. The stats are just a joy to look at in these beautiful little pie charts. There's permission access handling, cloud architecture that just makes it so fast and so stable. You never have a problem with your site, which is really amazing, in this day and age. There's an innovative drag and drop Ajax interface, just makes it a joy to use. So for a free trial, go to squarespace.com, sign up for a free account. You don't need a credit card. Just try it out and build your own site. See what I'm saying for yourself. Then if you decide to purchase it, use offer code TWiL, T-W-I-L, and you'll get 10% off the lifetime of your new account. It's really reasonable to begin with, and you get 10% off that. It starts at about $12 a month. That's TWiL at squarespace.com. Thanks so much for their support. All right, so let's talk about tablets, Rick. You bought yourself the Dell Inspiron, which doesn't it have kind of a snap-off aspect, and then you can take it to go?
Yeah, it does not. There are some tablets that came out at CES that have that. What I did was I started buying tablets as soon as they came out, other than the iPad. I played with it in the store, and since I'm not an Apple guy, I didn't buy one. But I've been looking at tablets from the perspective of, can I really use this in a courtroom? The Apple iPad is being used by many lawyers now in the courtroom because of its portability. They can basically access the web. They can project, do presentation work. They can put stuff up on a screen in the courtroom in a very small package. But my view on that is that you can do that with a netbook too. All of a sudden, everybody, because tablets are cool, wants to get rid of their little netbooks. And up until now, they've been pretty underpowered. But the Dell Duo has a flip-around screen, and I wish I could show it to you, but when you tilt it up, the screen is on hinges, and it flips up. You put the cover back down, and you've got a fat tablet. But it runs Windows 7. So any of the productivity software or presentation software or any of the litigation support software that a lawyer is used to running runs on this because it has a dual-core Atom processor. So now the netbooks with these dual-core processors really have the same processing power. There it is. Really have the same processing power as the notebooks that lawyers used to carry to court, which were in the 3 to 5 pound range, even the ultralights. So my view on tablets is go play with them. I bought a $99 tablet from Walgreens, a China import that's got a little 7-inch screen just for fun, and the processor is so slow as to make it unusable. If a lawyer is going to be looking at a tablet, he really needs to make sure that it's got a dual-core processor and that it will run the software that he needs it to run for the purposes that he's going to use it. That's my take on it. Again, like Deion Sanders, when they asked him if he was going to play professional football or professional baseball, he said both. And I like having both the tablet option and the netbook or hard keyboard notebook option in the same unit.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a personal lesson in how the tablets have infiltrated the world of lawyers in the mainstream right after Christmas, when my husband came to me and said, okay, I want an iPad. My husband's a lawyer too. And my husband, you know, whereas I'm a lawyer who uses a lot of technology in my life, in all aspects of my life, my husband does not at all. And, you know, has never been one of these people who, when he goes to trial, and he goes to trial a lot, uses the in-court tech stuff. In fact, he's had trials where he's had the other side have it be all about the technology, and feels that, you know, part of the reason that he's won is that he's been able to connect with the jury directly, where the other side was monkeying about with their presentations and in courtroom technology. But you know, so for him to come in and say, I really want an iPad, you know, I need it for depositions, just keeping track of calendar, email, all that stuff. This was a huge, you know, watershed event in my mind for the entire tablet community. But I think, Evan, you have not quite taken the plunge, have you?
No, I haven't. I just can't commit to anything. I still carry a BlackBerry, so you know, I just listen to you all talk about it and think about these things and watch as an outsider. One of these days, I'm gonna commit. I'm just so indecisive when it comes to all this stuff. No doubt, I would love to have an iPad. I see people using them on the train. They look so you know, useful, but here I am with my indecision. Maybe that should have been one of my New Year's resolution, to be more resolute when it comes to those things. But
you know, Denise, one thing that people don't realize is that we already have had tablet computers. In fact, the iPhone 4 and the Android Droid X, which I use, or the Sprint Evo, they are tablet computers. They got 4.3-inch screens. You can read on them. You can hold them in your hand. You can operate them with one hand. So to me, the tablets are just an extension of that same form factor, and they're not a computer such as we're used to using to create documents. I mean, lawyers, we're about document production. And I just don't think you can do that effectively on a virtual keyboard. I think you need a hard keyboard, and the netbooks are the smallest, most efficient way of doing that, in my opinion.
I don't know. You know, my very tech gun-shy husband is using the virtual keyboard on his iPad just fine, loves it. I offered him an external keyboard. He said, no, don't need it. Like the virtual keyboard. Okay. So we will see. Bill, any thoughts on the tablet world as relates to, well, I mean, we could go on for the next 2 hours if we were to talk about media and cultural studies and all the ramifications that this shift in computing might have on those things. But any quick thoughts?
Well, I'm also like Evan. I'm a little bit of a resistor. I can see the appeal, but I haven't bought into it. I count a lot on my students to teach me about these things, so that they're the ones who are on the cutting edge, and then I just kind of you know, play with theirs and then decide what I want. But yeah, certainly in terms of mobile computing and the development of computers everywhere and the ability of people to be consistently online and that sort of thing, I'm not sure briefly would be the way to respond to that question, but certainly there are important social ramifications of what happens when everybody is always online, always connected, always you know, able to access a computer and able to access with it the entire you know, world of online knowledge, sociability, and so forth. Those are very big questions.
Oh, bless you. What a wonderful segue you have given me to talk about Gabrielle Giffords and the shooting last weekend in Arizona, because I've been reading a lot of coverage this week about, you know, obviously the social media behind Mr. Loeffner and the breadcrumbs that he left behind, and also about the fact that he knew precisely where Ms. Giffords would be and when, and you know, wanted to go act out his terrible plot. For anybody who has been living in a closet for the last couple of weeks, there was a shooting in Arizona where Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords was shot and injured. 13 people were injured. 6 people are dead, including a federal judge, John M. Roll, a 9-year-old girl, Christina Green, and just, terrible, terrible tragedy. And I think, it's worthwhile to consider it from the standpoint of, how it was able to happen, and how what we can know about the context of it from the trail that the shooter left behind online. Do you think that this will have any impact other than on congresspeople and other public officials, other than the fact that maybe they should think about if they're going to be standing in a parking lot with no security detail, perhaps wearing Kevlar? Do you think that they will start to shut down their, here's where I'm going to be and when kind of communications? It seems to me that's completely at odds with their ability to do their job, and they really can't do that. What do you think, Evan?
Certainly a good time to be thinking about those things. I mean, the notion that a politician is in bodily danger whenever they're out in public is certainly nothing new. It goes all the way back at least to, was it Andrew Jackson? I think, was he the first president where there was an attempt actually made on his life? I think the guns misfired, and I don't think there was a successful assassination of a president until Lincoln, but we know that there have been several since then. So, there's no question. I mean, it's really not even worth, not even subject to reasonable debate as to how much a politician or any public figure should be conscientious of the information that they're putting out there about that stuff. And, if you're going to be talking about things on Twitter and Foursquare and Facebook status updates and all that stuff, that just is greatly going to magnify the problem. It's one of those things I guess I'd never thought about, but I was a little bit surprised after all of this, thinking that apparently most members of the House of Representatives, at least, don't go to places like this with the security detail like other politicians do. She certainly wasn't alone. She had an entourage of sorts with staffers and interns and federal judges. But
collateral damage, as they are now known.
Oh yes, isn't that an awful way to think about it? But it's so true. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm reluctant to say that it really has to be a game changer, and that we really have to think of things so fundamentally different if we realize, as I started off on this answer, taking a long view of history into the past, looking about how political figures have always been good grief. I mean, that's not even, and not just look, you can go long before our own nation's history. I mean, what was that one play that Shakespeare wrote about that famous Roman emperor and all that stuff? He wasn't necessarily in public. He was on the Senate floor when Julius Caesar was assassinated. But yeah, there's really nothing meaningful to say as to why there shouldn't be some serious thought on the part of these politicians about how much information they're going to put out there.
Bill, do you think that we will see a reining in of that kind of thing, or are the floodgates open and will they continue to remain so and just be even more of this information available as technology becomes more ubiquitous, as you were saying?
I certainly hope not. I would hate to be in a situation that politicians absolutely fear to go out in public and to meet their constituents. And part of the ability to connect with the representatives is that we can have town hall meetings, we can have forums, we can have places where you can meet your congressperson face to face, and that would be a terrible loss for our democracy if that were to become just off limits. But of course, we have seen a ramping up of security, and it's much more difficult to get into the White House now. The Capitol building is secured off in different ways, and obviously people have to think about it. And it's not me up there as the politician with the target on me to I'm as sitting back here. Who am I to say that they shouldn't take greater precautions? But of course, if that's what it's going to come down to, I think what's interesting here is that it's a kind of a clash between these values that we expect to work in our democracy, right? It's almost this kind of classic case where the First Amendment comes into conflict with the Second Amendment, and the restrictions that we place on speech and the restrictions that we place on gun rights and things like that, they track very separately most of the time. And then in a case like the Giffords shooting, unfortunately, they come together because, of course, people were very ready to make the connection between the climate of hate speech, the climate of people calling for in veiled and coded ways, or maybe even direct ways, the assassination of people. I think that the history of jurisprudence that applies to the First Amendment and the history of jurisprudence that applies to the Second Amendment, the way that they intertwine is something that we need to look at a little bit more. The First Amendment is obviously not unlimited, right? There are a lot of restrictions on speech. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie house. You can't, slander and libel. And in this case, you can't use, fighting words, right? The clear and present danger test of when will your act of speech actually incite someone to go out and commit violence, right? And so we had this very absolutist approach, at least in the last 20 years, 20, 30 years, to the Second Amendment, when in fact the non-absolutist approach to the First Amendment has been growing, for most of, throughout the 20th century, right? So rethinking how those constitutional rights and freedoms balance each other and what the balancing test should be and that sort of thing becomes in the case of the Giffords shooting, especially in the wake of the Giffords shooting, now is the time to be thinking about exactly how those two interrelate.
Here's kind of an off-base question, but since I've got at least two other lawyers on the panel with me today, I'm wondering if anybody knows the answer. He's being charged federally right now. He's in federal custody and will also be charged under state law for the deaths and attempted murders of these other people. Or if they were not attempted murders, we'll see what he gets charged with. But procedurally, I'm wondering how that's all going to play out. There's no federal death penalty, so double jeopardy if you go through a federal trial on. I guess it would only relate to some of the victims, and he wouldn't actually be tried in two courts for the same crime against the same victim. I guess maybe that I just answered my own question. Evan, any thoughts on that?
Did I hear you say there's no federal death penalty? Is that right?
Isn't there no federal death penalty?
I don't know. I mean, Timothy McVeigh was executed at the federal penitentiary, and maybe there's been something I missed. But
no, I think you're right about that. I just tend to think about it as a state penalty. But,
I mean, I think it's usually
rare at the federal
usually
level.
just kind of agreements among the prosecutors there, because I know going back to the Oklahoma City bombing thing, Terry Nichols went through a federal trial first, I believe, and then was tried in state court, and the state prosecutors kind of exercise some forbearance a little bit. I don't know if there's anything that would determine it procedurally, maybe just who can get their hands on him first, but from whatever's going to make sense of making sure the guy doesn't get away from the prosecutor's perspective, I guess.
Right. The other thing I wanted to hit on with this is just the trail of information that Loeffner left behind, and people, picking apart his MySpace and YouTube, et cetera, accounts. The really interesting little tidbit of information that Violet Blue had in her article about social media and all of this was that Giffords' YouTube account was subscribed to only 2 people, and one of them was Loeffner. So go figure that one out. Yeah. But Bill, do you see any cultural or media significance to the fact that there are these sort of trails and auras around people that they leave online? And I guess, if someone were going to get really, really diabolical about all this and was going to plot something like this, what they might do is just clean up their social media presence and be the, star, upstanding, community-oriented citizen, and then go out and do something horrific, sort of, try and alleviate whatever punishment they might get down the road, or just confound, whoever's investigating the crime. What do you think about that?
Well, it does raise a couple things. One is the point that Evan raised earlier about the ability to impersonate people, whether through 3D technology or now through online social media. You know, in the wake of this, there were already fake accounts purporting to be Lofners and that sort of thing. So that's a very interesting way in which the social media is confounding our ability to kind of understand who these people might be. The issue that you raised there, though, about keeping a squeaky clean record and that sort of thing, it's interesting how difficult it is to actually manage multiple identities in that way, and that's something that we have another story about identity and the national efforts to kind of add security and an identity layer to the internet. So we might touch on this a little bit later anyway, but that problem of who you are and how you can validate who you are and the trail that you leave as you're going through the world now, through the virtual world, it's harder than we imagine to kind of keep those things separate and to maintain strict identities and distinct identities. And that's both a danger, because that means that it's, once, for example, Google releases some information about search habits, that you can pin it down to an actual person who did that, even if it was anonymized beforehand. So that's the kind of privacy problem. But on the other hand, I think it's really interesting, especially in the case of this, the reaction to this shooter, or in other instances where we've seen anonymous, track down the lady in England who threw the cat into the rubbish bin or whatever, and how quickly they were able to find out a ton of information about her, and then to act upon that. I think it suggests that what we have to think about in terms of our identity is not just well, I guess it's how malleable it is, but how fixed it is in different ways. I think that the public sphere that kind of coalesced around Lofner and the ability of people to find out so quickly who is this guy and what's he up to and what does he believe and what does he think, and that he was one of the only 2 people who were subscribed to this YouTube channel, I think that's actually on the whole a benefit for society. I think that Anonymous can pick on little girls, and 4chan can pick on innocent victims, but in a case like this, we see the power of an entire community to come together and provide little bits and pieces of information that add up to a picture that allow us understanding, that allow us to not just speculate about who he might be, but to kind of begin to know and understand what just happened to our country.
I do definitely want to get to that national ID story because it's interesting and affects all of us potentially. But unfortunately, we're a bit tight on time today. It's probably going to have to wait till episode 95. I do want to get to our tip of the week and resource of the week before we sign off. But before I do that, I'm going to thank and acknowledge MailRoute, our other sponsor for today. It's a secure hosted service that offers virus and spam filtering for companies of any size. Whether you're a single user or a company with tens of thousands of employees, MailRoute can eliminate viruses and spam, which, just think about that. No more viruses, no more spam coming in through your email. It reduces the load on your email server, it lowers your costs, and it makes your email usable again. Typical MailRoute customers see a 95% reduction in their inbound email volume. So it doesn't even make it to your server to be filtered. It gets filtered before it even comes to you. And virtually no false positives. Leo Laporte of the TWiL Network loves MailRoute. He's a longtime user. He's been using it for more than 6 years. It's been his top choice for spam and virus filtering all along. Tom Merritt, also of our network, uses it, loves it. So it's an incredible solution. There's nothing easier for mail filtering than MailRoute. There's no hardware or software to install. You just sign up with MailRoute, and then you change the MX records for your domain to start your mail flowing through them, and they do all the work for you. So visit mailroute.info to sign up, and as a TWiL listener, you'll receive 10% off the life of your account. So thank you, MailRoute, so much for sponsoring the show. I do want to get to our resource of the week because I think it's a really good one. It's by Sheni Jardin over at Boing Boing, and she is pointing to Glenn Fleischman over at Ars Technica on how to secure all the connections over which you pass anything personal, financial, or confidential via Wi-Fi. Great tips to know when you're at home or the office. but particularly vital when using any public Wi-Fi at cafes, airports, and the like. So go check out how to stay safe at public Wi-Fi spots. And our resource of the week, also a good one. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the resource of the week. The tip of the week is also really, really important for anyone who's publishing online with any kind of interactivity comment facility. And it's titled by David Kravitz over at Threat Level, the $105 fix that could protect you from copyright troll lawsuits. So this is simply a step-by-step of how to register yourself for the DMCA process. So you register an agent with the Copyright Office, you pay a fee, and now now you're eligible for the DMCA safe harbors, which is a really great thing to do, and it is something that a lot of casual users of the web don't think to do or don't even know it's an option. So here you go, step by step. With the fees, go take care of it now. So that's it for our resource and tip and all the news stories we're going to cover this week. I want to thank Bill Kirkpatrick from Denison University in Granville, Ohio. Bill, where can folks find you? Do you have a website, and what is your Twitter name?
Yes, I'm at www.billkirkpatrick.net, and my Twitter is @BillKirkP, so @BILLKIRKP on Twitter. Thank you for
It was
having
wonderful
me.
having you on the show. I know you were a listener of the show, and then we had some email exchanges, and it's been really fun having you on. Hope to do so again sometime soon.
I hope so, too. I appreciate it.
Okay. Also, first-time panelist, really appreciated your insights, Rick George, the future lawyer.
Thank you.
It's been really fun to have you. Where can folks find you other than futurelawyer.com? Are you on Twitter as well?
Twitter, Rick Georges, so at Rick Georges, RickGeorges. And again, most of my Facebook friends find me at Future Lawyer Rick Georges.
Great. Thanks so much again for being on the show. Hope to have you back on again sometime soon as well.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully I'll have a better internet connection next time.
Yes, we'd love to see more of you than just sort of the top of your head. I'm afraid.
Well, you don't want to see that much more of me, but the head would be nice.
Yes. And of course, all the technology you can hold up and show us too.
That I could do next time.
Super. Evan, love having you back on the show. Love seeing your clean-shaven face.
Oh, well, thank you.
I hope all is well in chilly Chicago in the coming week.
Great. Yes. Thank you very much. Wonderful conversation today. Really enjoyed talking with you, Bill, and with Rick. I read both of your guys' stuff. So lots of fun, and looking forward to next week, Denise.
Me too. And in the meantime, you can find Evan at internetcases.com, and he's Internet Cases on Twitter. And with that, we will adjourn this episode of This Week in Law, and we will see you next week for episode 95. Tune into our Facebook page in the meantime, facebook.com/thisweekinlaw, and I will do my utmost to post up some of the topics that we're going to talk about next week. Till then, have a great week. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.